Chapter 6. I become Supreme Lord of the Bathroom. Once I got over the fact we had a nice tour, though I was careful not to walk behind him. I'd done pooper scooper patrol in the Macy's Thanksgiving Day parade a few times. And I'm sorry, I did not trust Curran back in the way I trusted his friend. We passed a volleyball pit. Several of the campers nudged each other. One pointed to the Minotaur horn I was carrying. Another said, "That's him." Most of the campers were older than me. His dear friends were bigger than Grover. All of them trotted around in orange Camp Hut blood t-shirts, with nothing else to cover their bare, shaggy hindquarters. I wasn't normally shy, but the way they stared at me made me uncomfortable. I felt like they were expecting me to do a flip or something. I looked back at the farmhouse. It was a lot bigger than I'd realized, 4 stories tall. Sky blue with white trim, like an upscale seaside resort. I was checking out the brace eagle weather vane on top when something caught my eye. A shadow in the uppermost window of the attic gable. Something had moved the curtain just for a second, and I got the distinct impression I was being watched. "What's up there?" I asked Curran. He looked where I was pointing, and his smile faded. "Just the attic." "Somebody lives there?" "No," he said with finality. "Not a single living thing." I got the feeling he was being truthful, but I was also sure something had moved that curtain. "Come along, Percy," Curran said, his leathered tone now a little forced. "Lots to see." We walked through the strawberry field, where campers were picking bushels of berries, while a student played a tune on a reed pipe. Curran told me that camp grew a nice crop for export to New York restaurants and Mount Olympus. "It pays for expenses," he explained, "and the strawberries take most no effort." He said Mrs. D had this effort on fruit-bearing plants. It just went crazy when he was around. He worked best with wine grapes, but Mrs. D was restricted from growing those, so they grew strawberries instead. I watched the steer playing his pipe. His music was causing lines of bugs to leave the strawberry patch in every direction, like refugees fleeing a fire. I wondered if Grover could work that kind of magic with music. I wondered if he was still inside the farmhouse, getting chewed out by Mrs. D. "Grover won't get into much trouble, will he?" asked Curran. "I mean, he was a good protector, really." Curran sighed. He shed his tweed jacket and strapped it over his horseback like a saddle. "Grover has big dreams, Percy, perhaps bigger than are reasonable. To reach his goal, he must first demonstrate great courage by succeeding as a keeper. Finding a new camper, you bring him safe to have blood heal." "But he did that." I might agree with you," Curran said, "but it is not my place to judge. Dionysus and the Council of Cloven elders must decide. I'm afraid they might not see this assignment as a success. After all, Grover lost you in New York. Then there's the unfortunate fate of your mother, and the fact that Grover was unconscious when you dragged him over the property line. The council might question whether this shows any courage on Grover's part. I wanted to protest. None of what happened was Grover's fault. I felt really guilty. If I hadn't given Grover the slip at the bus station, he might not have gotten in trouble. He's get a second chance, won't he? Curran winced. I'm afraid that was Grover's second chance, Percy. The council was not anxious to give him another, either. After what happened the first time, 5 years ago, Olympus knows. I advised him to wait longer before trying again. He's still so small for his age. How old is he? Oh, 28. What? And he's in 6th grade? Satyrs measure half as fast as humans, Percy. Grover has been the equivalent of a middle school student for the past 6 years. That's horrible. Quite, Curran agreed. At any rate, Grover is a late bloomer, even by steer standards, and not yet very accomplished at woodland magic. Alas, he was anxious to pursue his dreams. Perhaps now he will find some other career. That's not fair, I said. What happened the first time? Was it really so bad? Curran looked away quickly. Let's move along, shall we? But I wasn't quite ready to let the subject drop. Something had occurred to me when Curran talked about my mother's fate, as if he were intentionally avoiding the word death. The beginnings of an idea, a tiny hopeful fire started forming in my mind. Curran, I said, if the gods and Olympus and all that are real, yes, child? Does that mean the underworld is real too? Curran expressed doubt. Yes, child, he paused, as if choosing his words carefully. There's a place where spirits go after death. But for now, until we know more, I would urge you to put that out of your mind. What do you mean, until we know more? Come, Percy, let's see the words. As we got closer, I realized how huge the forest was. It took up at least a quarter of the valley, with no trees so tall and thick. You can imagine nobody had been in there since Native Americans. Curran said, the woods are stocked. If you care to try your luck, but go armed. Stuck with what? I asked. Armed with what? You'll see. Capture the flag is Friday night. Do you have your own sword and shield? My own? No, Curran said. I don't suppose you do. I think a size 5 will do. I'll visit the armory later. I wanted to ask what kind of summer camp had an armory, but there was too much else to think about. So the tour continued. I saw the archery range, the canoeing lake, the stables, which Curran didn't seem to like very much, the javelin range, the sing-along amphitheater, and the RV arena where Curran said they held sword and spear fights. Sword and spear fights? I asked. Cabin challenges and all that, he explained. Not literal, usually. Oh, yes. And there's the mess hill. Curran pointed to an outdoor building framed in white Grecian columns on a hill overlooking the sea. There was a dozen stone picnic tables. No roof, no walls. What do you do when it rains? I asked. Kurt looked down at me as if I'd gone a little weird. We still have to eat, don't we? I decided to drop the subject. Finally, he showed me the cabins. There were 12 of them, nestled in the woods by the lake. So Lincoln and you, with 2 at the base and 5 in a row on either side. And they were without doubt the most bizarre collection of buildings I've ever seen, except for the fact that each had a large brass number above the door. Odds on the left side, evens on the right. They look absolutely nothing alike. Number 9 had smokestacks, like a tiny factory. Number 4 had tomato veins on the walls, and a roof made out of real glass. 7 seems to be made of solid gold, which gleamed so much in the sunlight it was almost impossible to look at. Now faced a common area about the size of a soccer field, dotted with Greek statues, fountains, flower beds, and a couple of basketball hoops, which were more my speed. In the center of the field was a huge stone-lined fire pit. Even though it was a warm afternoon, the hearth smoldered. A girl about 9 years old was tending the flames, poking the coals with a stick. The pair of cabins at the head of a field, numbers 1 and 2, looked like his and hers mausoleums. Big white marble boxes with heavy columns in front. Cabin 1 was the biggest and bulkiest of the 12. Its polished bronze doors shimmered like a hologram, so that from different angles lightning bolts seemed to streak across them. Cabin 2 was more graceful somehow, with slimmer columns garlanded with pomegranates and flowers. The walls were covered with images of peacocks. Zeus and Hera, I guessed. Correct, Kern said. The cabins look empty. Several of the cabins are. That's true. No one ever stays in 1 or 2. Okay. So each cabin had a different god, like a mascot. 12 cabins for the 12 Olympians, but why would some be empty? I stopped in front of the first cabin on the left, cabin 3. It wasn't high and mighty like cabin 1, but long and low and solid. The outer walls were of rough gray stone studded with pieces of seashell and coral, as if the slabs had been hewn straight from the bottom of the ocean floor. I peeked inside the open doorway and Kern said, "Oh, I wouldn't do that." Before he could pull me back, I caught the salty scan of the interior, like the wind on the shore at Montauk. The interior walls glowed like abalone. There were 6 empty bunks spread with silk sheets turned down, but there was no sign anyone had ever slept there. The place felt so sad and lonely. I was glad when Kern pulled his hand on my shoulder and said, "Come along, Percy." Most of the other cabins were crowded with campers. Number 5 was bright red, a real nasty paint job, as if the color had been splashed on with buckets and fists. The roof was lined with barbed wire. A stuff seemed to float me. Inside, I could see a bunch of mean-looking kids, both girls and boys, arm wrestling and arguing with each other while rock music blurred. The loudest was a girl maybe 13 or 14. She wore a size of XXXL. Can't have blood. t-shirt under a flag jacket. She zored on me and gave me an evil sneer. She reminded me of Nancy Boo a bit. Through the camper, girl was much bigger and tougher looking, and her hair was long and stringy and brown instead of red. I kept walking, trying to stay clear of Kern's hooves. We haven't seen any other centaurs, I observed. No, said Kern sadly. My kinsmen are a wild and barbaric folk, I'm afraid. You might encounter them in the wilderness or at major sporting events, but you won't see any here. You said your name was Kern. Are you really? He smiled down at me. The Kern from the stories? Trainer of Hercules and all that? Yes, Percy, I am. But shouldn't you be dead? Kern paused, as if the question intrigued him. I honestly don't know about should be. The truth is, I can't be dead. You see, ages ago the gods granted my wish. I could continue the work I loved. I could be a teacher of heroes as long as humanity needed me. I gained much from that wish, and I gave up much, but I'm still here, so I can only assume I'm still needed. I thought about being a teacher for 3,000 years. It wouldn't help me my top 10 things to wish for list. Isn't it ever get boring? No, he said, horribly depressing at times, but never boring. Why depressing? Kern seemed to turn hard of hearing again. Oh, look, he said, Annabeth is waiting for us. The blonde girl I'd met at the big house was reading a book in front of the last cabin on the left, number 11. When we reached her, she looked me over critically like she was still thinking about how much I drooled. I tried to see what she was reading, but I couldn't make it the title. I thought my dyslexia. I was acting up. When I realized the title wasn't even English. The letters looked Greek to me. Literally Greek. There were pictures of temples and statues and different kinds of columns, like those in an architecture book. And a bit Kern said, I have master's archery class at noon. Would you take Percy from here? Yes, sir. Cabin 11, Kern told me, gesturing toward the doorway. Make yourself at home. Out of all the cabins, 11 looked like the most like a regular old summer camp cabin, with the emphasis on old. The threshold was worn down, the brown paint peeling. Over the doorway was one of those doctor's symbols, a winged pole with 2 snakes wrapped around it. Why did they call it a cactus? Inside it was packed with people, both boys and girls. Way more than a number of bunk beds. Sleeping bags were spread all over on the floor. It looked like a gym, while a red cross had set up an evacuation center. Kern didn't go in. The door was too low for him. But when the campers saw him, they all stood and bowed respectfully. Well then, Kern said, good luck, Percy. I'll see you at dinner time. Dinner. He galloped away toward the archery range. I stood in the doorway looking at the kids. They weren't bowing anymore. They were staring at me, sizing me up. I know this routine. I gone through it as enough schools. Well, and Beth prompted, go on. So naturally, I tripped coming in the door and made a total fool of myself. There were some sneakers from my campers, but none of them said anything. Annabeth announced, Percy Jackson, meet Cabin 11. Regular or undetermined? Somebody asked. I didn't know what to say, but Annabeth said undetermined. Everybody groaned. A guy who was a little older than the rest came forward. Now, campers, that's what we're here for. Welcome, Percy. You can have that spot on the floor. Right over there. The guy was about 19, and he looked pretty cool. He was tall and muscular, with short, cropped, sandy hair and a friendly smile. He wore an orange tank top, cutoffs, sandals, and a leather necklace with 5 different colored clay beads. The only thing unsettling about his appearance was a thick white scar that ran from just beneath his right eye to his jaw, like an old knife slash. This look, Annabeth said, and her voice sounded different somehow. I glanced over and could have sworn she was blushing. She saw me looking and her expression hardened again. He's your counselor for now. For now? I asked. You're undetermined, Luke explained patiently. They don't know what cabin to put you in. So, you're here. Cabin 11 takes all newcomers. All visitors? Naturally, we would. Hermes oppression is the god of travelers. I look at the tiny section of floor they'd given me. I had nothing to put there to mark as my own. No luggage, no clothes, no sleeping bag, just a minor torch horn. I thought about setting that down, but then I remembered that Hermes was also the god of thieves. I looked around the camper's face. Some sullen and suspicious, some grinning stupidly, some eyeing me as if they were waiting for a chance to get my pockets. How long will I be here? I asked. Good question, Luke said, until you're determined. How long will that take? The campers all laughed. Come on, Annabeth told me. I'll show you the volleyball court. I've already seen it. Come on. She grabbed my wrist and dragged me outside. I could hear the kids of Cabin 11 laughing behind me. And we were a few feet away. Annabeth said, Jackson, what have you to do better than that? What? She rolled her eyes and mumbled under the breath. I can't believe I thought you were the one. What's your problem? I was getting angry now. All I knew is I killed some bold guy. Don't talk like that, Annabeth told me. Do you know how many kids at this camp wish they'd had your chance to get killed? To fight the Minotaur. What do you think we trained for? I shook my head. Look, if the thing I thought really was a Minotaur, the same one in the stories? Yes. Then there's only one. Yes. And he died like a gazillion years ago, right? The seas killed him in the labyrinth. Monsters don't die, Percy. They can be killed, but they don't die. Oh, thanks. Let's get that clears up. They don't have souls like you and me. You can dispel them for a while, maybe even for a whole lifetime, if you're lucky. But they are permanent forces. Curran calls them archetypes. Eventually, they reform. I thought about Mrs. Dodds. You mean if I killed one accidentally with a sword? I mean your math teacher. That's right. She's still out there. You just made her very, very mad. How do you know about Mrs. Dodds? You talk in your sleep. You almost called her something. A furry? Their heads tortured right. Annabeth glanced nervously at the ground, as if she expected to open up and swallow her. You shouldn't call them by name, even here. We call them the kindly ones, if we have to speak of them at all. Look, is there anything we can say without it thundering? I sounded whinny, even to myself. But right then I didn't care. Why do I have to stay in cabin 11 anyway? Why is everybody so crowded together? There are plenty of empty banks right over there. I pointed at the first few cabins, and Annabeth turned pale. You don't just choose a cabin, Percy. It depends on who your parents are, or your parent. She stares at me, waiting for me to get in. My mom is Sally Jackson, I said. She works at the candy store in Grand Control Station, at least she used to. I'm sorry about your mom, Percy, but that's not what I mean. I'm talking about your other parent, your dad. He's dead. I never know him. Annabeth sighed. Clary, she had this conversation before with other kids. Your father's not dead, Percy. How can you say that? You know him? No, of course not. Then how can you say because I know you? You wouldn't be here if you're not one of us. You don't know anything about me. No, she raised an eyebrow. I bet you moved around from school to school. I bet you were kicked out of a lot of them. How? Diagnosed with dyslexia, probably ADHD too. I tried to swallow my embarrassment. What does that have to do with anything? Taken together, it's almost a sure sign. Letters float off the page when you read, right? That's because your mind is hurt for ancient Greek. And the ADHD, you're impulsive. Can't sit still in the classroom. That's your battlefield reflexes. In a real fight, late keep you alive. As for the attention problems, that's because you see too much, Percy, not too little. Your senses are better than a regular mortal's. Of course, the teachers won't want you medicate. Most of them were monsters. They don't want you seeing them for what they are. You sounded like you went through the same thing. Most of the kids here did. If you weren't like us, you couldn't have survived in the monitor, much less like Ambersa and Nectar. Ambersa and Nectar? The food and drink we were giving you to make you better. That stuff would kill a normal kid. It would turn your blood to fire and your bones to sand, and you'd be dead. Face it, you were half-blood. Half-blood. I was reeling with so many questions. I didn't know where to start. And then a husky voice had yelled, "Well, nearby." I looked over. A big girl from an ugly red cabin was centering toward us. She had 3 other girls behind her, all big and ugly and mean looking like her, all wearing camo jackets. Colorsy. And a bit sad. Why didn't you go polish your spear or something? Sure, Miss Princess, the big girl said, so I can run you through with it Friday night. Caracas, Annabeth said, which I somehow understand was Greek for go to the crows. Though I had a feeling it was a worse cause than it sounded. You don't stand a chance. We'll pulverize you, Claire said. But her eyes twitched. Perhaps she wasn't sure she could follow the threat. She turned toward me. Who's this little runt? Percy Jackson, Annabeth said. Nicholas, daughter of Eris. I blinked like the word God. Percy sneered. You got a problem with that? No, I said, recovering my wits. Explain the bad smell. Karen growled. We got an attention ceremony for newbies, Percy, whatever. Come on, I'll show you. Percy, Annabeth tried to say. Stay out of it, wise girl. Annabeth looked pained, but she did stay out of it. I didn't really want her help. I was a new kid. I had to earn my own rat. I handed Annabeth my monitor horn and get ready to fight. But before I knew it, Percy had me by the neck and was dragging me toward a cinder block building that I knew immediately was the bathroom. I was kicking and punching. I had been in plenty of fights before, but this big girl Classy had hands like iron. She dragged me into the girls' bathroom. There was a line of toilets on one side and a lot of shower stalls down the other. It smelled just like any public bathroom, and I was thinking as much as I could think with Kirsty ripping my hair out, as if this place belongs to the gods. They should have been able to afford classier Johns. Clary's friends were all laughing, and I was trying to find the strength I'd used to fight the Monitor, but it just wasn't there. Like his big 3 material, Clary said, as she pushed me toward one of the toilets. Yeah, right. Monitor probably fell over laughing, as he was so stupid looking. Her friends sneered. Annabeth stood in the counter, watching through her fingers. Percy bent me over on my knee and started pushing me head toward the toilet bowl. It reeked like rusted pipes and, well, like what goes into toilets. I strained to keep my head up. I was looking at the scummy water, thinking, I will not go into that. I won't. Then something happened. I felt a tug in the pits of my stomach. I heard the plumbing rumble, the pipes shudder. Percy's grip on my hair loosened. Water shot out of the toilet, making an arc straight over my head. The next thing I knew, I was sprawling on the bathroom tile with Kirsty screaming behind me. I turned just as water blazes out of the toilet again, hitting Kirsty straight in the face so hard it pushed her down into her butt. The water stayed on her like the spray of a fire hose, pushing her backward into a shower stall. She struggled, gasping, and her friends started coming toward her. But then the other toilet exploded too. The 6 more streams of toilet water blasted them back. The showers acted up too, and together all the fixtures sprayed the camouflage girls right out of the bathroom, spitting them around like pieces of garbage being washed away. As soon as they were out the door, I felt the tug in my guts lessen, and the water shot off as quickly as it had started. The entire bathroom was flooded. Annabeth hadn't been spared. She was dripping wet, but she hadn't been pushed out the door. She was standing in exactly the same place, staring at me in shock. I looked down and realized I was sitting in the only dry spot in the whole room. There was a circle of dry floor around me. I didn't have one drop of water on my clothes, nothing. I stood up, my legs shaggy. Annabeth said, How did you? I don't know. We walked to the door outside. Clary and her friends were sprawled in the mud, and a bunch of other campers had gathered around to gawk. Clary's hair was flattened across her face. Her camouflage jacket was sopping, and she smelled like sage. She gave me a look of absolute hatred. You are dead, you boy. You're totally dead." I probably should have let it go, but I said, "You want to gargle with toilet water again, Percy? Close your mouth." Her friends had to hold her back. They dragged her toward cabin 5, while the other campers made way to avoid her failing feet. Annabeth stared at me. I couldn't tell whether she was just gozy out or angry at me for dozing her. "What?" I demanded. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking," she said, "that I want you to on my team for capture the flag." Chapter 7. My dinner goes up in smoke. Word of the bathroom incident spread immediately. Wherever I went, campers pointed at me and murmured something about toilet water. Or maybe they were just staring at Annabeth, who was still pretty much dripping wet. She showed me a few more places. The metal shop, where kids were frigging their own swords. The arts and crafts room, where steers were sandblasting a giant marble statue of a goat man. And the climbing wall, which actually consisted of two facing walls that shook violently. Dropped boulders sprayed lava and clashed together if you didn't get to the top fast enough. Finally, we returned to the canyon in lake, where the trail led back to the cabins. "I've got training to do," Annabeth said vaguely. "Dinner's at 7:30. Just follow your cabin to the mess hall." "Annabeth, I'm sorry about the toilets, whatever. It wasn't my fault." She looked at me skeptically, and I realized it was my fault. I'd made water shot out of the bathroom fixtures. I didn't understand how, but the toilets had responded to me. I had become one of the plumbing. "Do you need to walk to the arco?" Annabeth said. "Who? Not who. What?" "The arco. I'll ask her." I stared into the lake, wishing somebody would give me a straight answer for once. I wasn't expecting anyone to be looking back at me from the bottom, so my heart skipped a beat when I noticed two teenage girls sitting cross-legged at the base of the pier, but about 20 feet below, they were blue jeans and shimmering green t-shirts, and their brown hair floated loose around their shoulders as minnows darted in and out. They smiled and waved as if I were a long-lost friend. I didn't know what else to do. I waved back. "Don't encourage them," Annabeth warned. "Nades are terrible birds." "Nades?" I repeated. I'm feeling completely overwhelmed. "That's it. I want to go home now." Annabeth frowned. "Don't you get it, Percy? You're home. This is the only safe place on the earth for kids like us." "You mean mentally disturbed kids?" "I mean not human, not totally human anyway. Half human." "Half human and half what?" "I think you know." I didn't want to admit it, but I was afraid I did. I felt a tingling in my lumps, a sensation I sometimes felt when my mom talked about my dad. "God," I said, "half God." Annabeth nodded. "Your father isn't dead, Percy. He's one of the Olympians." "That's crazy, is it? What's the most common thing gods did in the old stories?" "They ran around falling in love with humans and having kids with them." "Do you think they've changed their habits in the last few millennia?" "But those are just, I must say myth again." Then I remember Curran's warning that in 2,000 years I might be considered a myth. "But if all the kids here are half gods, demigods," Annabeth said, "that's the official term, or half-bloods. Then who's your dad?" Her hands tightened around the pier railing. I got the feeling I just tread on sensitive subject. "My dad professor at West Point, she said. I haven't seen him since I was very small. He teaches American history. He's human. But you assume it has to be a male god who finds a human female attractive? How sexist is that? Who's your mom then? Cabin 6, meaning Annabeth Street. Athena, goddess of wisdom and battle. Okay, I thought, why not? And my dad? Undetermined, Annabeth said. Like I told you before, nobody knows. Except my mother. She knows. Maybe not Percy. Gods don't always reveal their identities. My dad would have. He loved her. Annabeth gave me a cautious look. She didn't want to burst my bubble. Maybe you're right. Maybe he'll send a sign. That's the only way to know for sure. Your father has to send you a sign claiming you as his son. Sometimes it happens. You mean sometimes it didn't? Annabeth ran her palm around along the rail. The gods are busy. They have a lot of kids and they don't always, well, sometimes they don't care about us, Percy. They ignore us. I thought about some of the kids I'd seen in the Hermes cabin, teenagers who looked stolen and depressed, as if they are still waiting for a call that would never come. I've known kids like that at Yancey Academy, shuffle off to boarding school by rich parents who didn't have the time to deal with them. But God should behave better. So I'm stuck here, I said. That's it for the rest of my life? It depends, Annabeth said. Some campers only stay the summer. If you're a child of Aphrodite or Demeter, you're probably not a real powerful force. The monsters might ignore you. So you can get by with a few months of summer training and live in the mortal world the rest of the year. But for some of us, it's too dangerous to leave. We're your rounders. In the mortal world, we attract monsters. They sense us. They came to challenge us. Most of the time, they'll ignore us until we're old enough to cause trouble, about 10 or 11 years old. But after that, most demigods either make their way here or they get killed off. A few manage to survive in the outside world and became famous. Believe me, if I told you the names, you'd know them. Some don't even realize they're demigods. But very, very few are like that. So monsters can't get in here? Annabeth shook her head. Not unless they're intentionally stuck in the woods, or especially summoned by somebody on the inside. Why would anybody want to summon a monster? Practice-wise, practical jokes. Practical jokes? The point is, the borders are sealed to keep mortals and monsters out. From the outside, mortals look into the valley and see nothing unusual. Just a strawberry farm. So you're a year-rounder? Annabeth nodded. From under the collar of her t-shirt, she pulled a leather necklace with clay beads of different colors. It was just like Luke's, except Annabeth also had a big gold ring strung on it, like a college ring. I've been here since I was 7, she said. Very obvious. On the last day of summer season, you get a bead for surviving another year. I've been here longer than most of the counselors, and they're all in college. Why did you come so young? She twisted the ring on her necklace. None of your business. Oh. I stood there for a minute in uncomfortable silence. So I could just walk out of here right now if I wanted to. It was stupid, but you could. That's Mrs. D or Kern's permission, but they wouldn't give permission until the end of the summer season, unless you were granted a quest. But that hardly ever happens. The last time her voice trailed off, I could tell from her tone that the last time hadn't gone well. Back in the sick room, I said, when you were feeding me that stuff. Ambrosia. Yeah, you asked me something about the summer solstice. Annabeth's shoulders tensed. So you do know something? Well, no. Back at my old school, I overheard Grover and Karen talking about it. Grover mentioned the summer solstice and said something like we didn't have much time because of the deadline. What did that mean? She clenched her fist. I wish I know. Karen said the steers. They know, but they won't tell me. Something's wrong in Olympus. Something pretty major. Last time I was there, everything seemed so normal. You've been to Olympus? Some of us year-rounders, Luke and Crusher, and I, and a few others, we took a field trip during winter. Storms. That's when the gods have their big and now council. But how did you get there? A Long Island Railroad, of course. You get off a Penn Station, Empire State Building, special elevator in the 600 floor. She looked at me like she was sure I must know this already. You are a New Yorker, right? Oh, sure. As far as I knew, there are only 102 floors in the Empire State Building, but I decided not to point that out. Right after we visited, and as the visit continued, the weather got weird, as if the gods had started fighting. A couple of times since, I've overheard steers talking. The best I can figure out is that something important was stolen, and if it isn't returned back summer solstice, there was going to be trouble. When you came, I was hoping. Athena can get along with just about anybody except for Ares. And of course she's got the Ariel with Poseidon. But, aside from that, I thought we could work together. I thought you might know something. I shook my head. I wished I could help her, but I felt too hungry and tired and mentally overloaded to ask any more questions. I've got to get a quest, Annabeth muttered to herself. I'm not too young. If they would just tell me the problem, I could smell barbecue smoke coming from somewhere nearby. Annabeth must have heard my stomach growl. She told me to go on. She'd catch me later. I left her on the pier, tracing her finger across the reel as if drawing a battle plan. Back at Cabin 11, everybody was talking and horsing around, waiting for dinner. For the first time, I noticed that a lot of the campers had similar features. Short noses, upturned eyebrows, mischievous smiles. They were the kind of kid that teachers would peg as troublemakers. Thankfully, nobody paid much attention to me as I walked over to my spot on the floor and plopped down with my monitor torn. The counselor, Luke, came over. He had the Hermes family resemblance, too. It was marred by that scar on his right cheek, but his smile was instant. Found you a sleeping bag, he said. And here, I stole you some toilet tries from the camp store. I couldn't tell if he was kidding about the stealing part. I said thanks. No problem. Luke sat next to me, pushed his back against the wall. Tough first day. I don't belong here, I said. I don't even believe in gods. Yeah, he said. That's how we all started. Once you started believing them, it doesn't get any easier. The bitterness in his voice surprised me, because Luke seemed like a pretty easygoing guy. He looked like he could handle just about anything. So your dad is Hermes? I asked. He pulled a switchblade out of his back pocket, and for a second I thought he was going to tug me, but he just grabbed the mud off the sole of his sandal. Yeah, Hermes, a wing-footed messenger guy. That's him. Messengers, medicine, travelers, merchants, thieves, anybody who uses the roads. That's why you're here, enjoying cabin love and hospitality. Hermes isn't picky about who can sponsors. I figured Luke didn't mean to call me nobody. He just had a lot on his mind. Yeah. You ever meet your dad? I asked once. I waited, thinking that if he wanted to tell me, he'd tell me. Apparently, he didn't. I wondered if the story had anything to do with how he got his scar. Luke looked up and managed a smile. Don't worry about it, Percy. The campers here, they're all mostly good people. After all, we're extended family, right? We take care of each other. He seemed to understand how lost I felt, and I was grateful for that, because an older guy like him, even if he was counselor, should have steered clear of an uncool middle schooler like me. But Luke had welcomed me into the cabin. He'd even stolen me some toiletries, which was the nicest thing anybody had done for me all day. Decided to ask him my last big question, the one that had been bothering me all afternoon. Price from Aris was joking about me being big 3 material. Then I met Biz twice. She said I might be one. She said I should talk to Oracle. What was that all about? Luke folded his knife. I hypothesis. What do you mean? His face twitched around the scar. Let's just say I messed things up for everybody else. The last 2 years, ever since my trip to the Garden of Hesperides went sore, Curran hasn't allowed any more quests. Annabeth's been dying to get out into the world. She pestered Curran so much he finally told her he already knew her fate. He'd had a prophecy from the oracle. He wouldn't tell her the whole thing, but he said Annabeth wasn't destined to go on a quest yet. She had to wait until somebody special came to the camp. Somebody special? Don't worry about it, kid, Luke said. Annabeth wants to think of every new camper who comes through here is the almond she's been waiting for. Now, come on, it's dinner time. The moment he said it, a horn blew in the distance. Somehow, I knew it was a conch shell, even though I had never heard one before. Luke yelled, 11, fall in! The whole cabin, about 20 of us, filed into the commons yard. We lined up in order of seniority, so of course I was dead last. Campers came from the other cabins too, except for the 3 empty cabins at the end. The cabinate, which had looked normal in the daytime but was now starting to glow silver as the sun went down. We marched up the hill into the mess hall pavilion. Steers joined us from a meadow. Naiads emerged from the canyon lake. A few other girls came out of the woods, And when I say out of the woods, I mean straight out of the woods. I saw one girl about 9 or 10 years old mount from the side of a maple tree and came skipping up the hill. In all, there were maybe 100 campers, a few dozen steers, and a dozen asteroid nymphs and naiads. At the pavilion, torches blazed around the marble columns. A central fire burned in a bronze brazier the size of a bathtub. Each cabin had its own table, covered in white cloth, trimmed in purple. 4 of the tables were empty, but cabin 11's was way overcrowded. I had to squeeze onto the edge of a bench with half of my butt hanging off. I saw Grover sitting at table 12 with Mrs. D, a few steers, and a couple of plump blonde boys who looked just like Mrs. D. Curran stood to one side, the picnic table being way too small for a centaur. Annabeth sat at table 6 with a bunch of serious-looking athletic kids, all with her gray eyes and honey blonde hair. Percy sat behind me at our table. She'd apparently gotten over being host down because she was laughing and blanched right along her friends. Finally, Kern pounded his hoof against the marble floor at the pavilion, and everybody fell silent. He raised a glass. To the gods. Everybody raised their glasses. To the gods. Wood nymphs came forward with platter foods. Great apples, strawberries, cheese, fresh baked bread, and yes, barbecue. My glass was empty, but Luke said, "Speak to it. Whatever you want." None Luke, of course. I said, "Cherry Coke." The glass filled with sparkling caramel liquid. Then I had an idea. Blue cherry Coke. The soda turned a violent shade of color. I took a cautious sip. Perfect. I drank a toast to my mother. She's not gone, I told myself. Not permanently. Anyway, she's in the underworld, and if that's a real place, then someday... Here you go, Percy, Luke said, handing me a platter of smoked brisket. I loaded my plate and was about to take a big bite when I noticed everybody getting up, carrying their plates toward the fire in the center of the pavilion. I wondered if they were going for dessert or something. "Come on," Luke told me. As I got closer, I saw that everyone was taking a portion of their meal and dropping it into the fire. The ripest strawberry, the juiciest slice of beef, the warmest, most buttery roll. Luke murmured in my ear, "Burnt offering for the gods. They like the smell." "You're kidding." His look warned me not to take this lightly, but I couldn't help wondering why an immortal, all-powerful being would like the smell of burning food. Luke approached the fire, bowed his head, and tossed in a cluster of fat red grapes. Hermes. I was next. I wish I knew what God's name to say. Finally, I made a silent plea. "Whoever you are, tell me, please." I scraped a big slice of brisket into the flame when I caught a whiff of smoke. I didn't gag. It smelled nothing like burning food. It smelled of hot chocolate and fresh baked brownies, hamburgers on the grill, and wildflowers, and 100 of other good things that shouldn't gone well together, but did. I could almost believe the gods could live off that smoke. When everybody had returned to their seats and finished eating their meals, Kern pulled his hoof again for our attention. Miss D got up with a huge sigh. Yes, I suppose I'd better say hello to you, Brussels Braids. Well, hello. Activities Director Cohen says the next capture. The flag was Friday. Cabin 5, Presley held the lures. A bunch of ugly cheering rose from the Irish table. Personally, Mrs. D continued, it couldn't care less. But congratulations also. I should tell you that we have a new camper today, Peter Johnson. Clara murmured something. Percy Jackson, Mrs. D corrected. That's right. Hurrah. And all that. Now run along to your silly campfire. Go on. Everybody cheered. We all headed down toward the amphitheater where Apollo's cabin led us sing-along. We sang camp songs about the gods and ate s'mores and joked around. And the funny thing was, I didn't feel that anyone was staring at me anymore. I felt that I was home. Later in the evening, when the spark from the campfire were curling into a starry sky, the conch horn blew again, and we all filed back to our cabin. I didn't realize how exhausted I was until I collapsed on my barrow sleeping bag. My fingers curled around the monitor tone. I thought about my mom, but I had a good thoughts. Her smile, the bedtime stories she would read me when I was a kid, the way she would tell me not to let the bedbugs bite. When I closed my eyes, I fell asleep instantly. That was my first day of Camp Half-Blood. I wished I had known how briefly I would get to enjoy my new home.